Welcome to Get the Facts, the program that provides you with information on government's policies and initiatives. I'm Theodore Henry. A platform to store data on prospective applicants wishing to serve on boards of public bodies is now in place. This follows the launch of the Corporate Governance Database of Prospective Directors by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. Today we look at the significance of this process with Director of the Public Body Board Secretariat at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Nofia Morgan. Welcome to the program, Ms. Morgan.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's jump right into getting the facts. Now, before we talk about the database itself, 'cause that's the new thing.
Yes, it is.
How did we select these leaders before?
I mean, prior to this, what usually obtains is that ministers would recommend persons to the public body boards.
Okay.
So that is how it normally operates.
So there wasn't a pool from which it would come. Okay. No. So how has the database changed this?
The database has changed considerably in the sense that there's a more structured approach now. You have a pool, as you said before, a pool of persons who you can select from with the requisite competencies.
Right.
And that is the game changer for it. You know, you have a lot more persons, qualified persons at that, and that is what we want, to match the competencies of the PBs to drive into the direction in which the government wants to go.
So help me out here. People apply.
Right. So we have created the first phase, which is an online application portal. So now you can visit the Ministry of Finance's website and you can create you can complete the application by creating a username and password to become a prospective director.
Okay, so I'm seeing how the change happens. First time, it was a recommendation. Perhaps the data wasn't as structured so much that you'd get from the recommendation.
Right. But what would happen is, because it's coming from the minister, it would be on his recommendation. Now, what the database will do is facilitate a directory of persons with different qualifications. It is now open to everyone who is so qualified and satisfies the competency to apply.
Open to everyone. Who sees this information?
The information on the database itself?
Yes. Who has access?
In terms of the access, it is just the Secretariat.
Oh, okay.
So it is not open to the public while you can complete the application. Once you have completed that application, that's the end of your access to the portal, if you want to call it that.
Okay. Understood.
But in terms of the back end of it, it is on our server and it is secured and it is only accessed by the persons in the Secretariat.
All right. Okay, I got it. Now, the Public Management and the Accountability Selection Regulations 2021 came into effect in January this year, right? So tell me about the process, this thing that has guided this move that we have gotten to.
Oh boy. This thing started even before I came to the Ministry of Finance and Public Service, as far back as 2012 when the Corporate Governance Framework was established. Now, the Public Body Management Accountability Act itself is the overarching legislation for public bodies.
Right.
And so the Corporate Governance Framework was developed out of a need to have a structured governance, to have transparency, to have an easier process, because, governance has hit, the ground. So everybody is trying to make sure that they're governance ready. And so the framework was developed on consultations, with both sides of the political sphere, and it came into effect in 2012.
Right.
So it was passed, and so out of that, they had developed different codes and policies so that it can guide the governance process.
Right. I'm glad that you mentioned 2012. This isn't a yesterday thing.
No.
Oftentimes we hear the end result and we see that something has happened, but this has been something.
Right. It has been developed over the years. Several consultations and so on came into it. As a matter of fact, Greta Bogues was instrumental, and she's part of the PSOJ. So academia was a part of the discussions that were had in terms of the development of the corporate governance framework, because this was an important piece of instrument that is needed in terms of the policy guidelines and governance for public body boards.
Understood. You mentioned Greta Bogues, and I do want to ask a little bit more about the stakeholders. How have they collaborated in the process of having this database?
Well, what had happened is that there were discussions, as I said before. We had established what is a group of individuals from different sectors, as I said, academia, PSOJ, and government bodies and other stakeholders to have discussions and to do research and to consult with each other to say, this is where we're going, this is the path, and the proper research was put into place, and what came out of it was a corporate governance framework to guide the public bodies.
And that corporate governance framework gave birth to the need for this tool.
Yes, because it is simplified. If you look at the stages, and how simplified from the PBMA, which is the Public Bodies Management Accountability Act.
Yes, please.
And then you have the Public Bodies Management is a long one. Nomination, Selection, and Appointment Regulations 2021, which you would have alluded to prior.
Right.
So the need for the regulation is to give a structured approach. So what it does is gives the rules. The regulation is saying, this is what is supposed to happen on the boards. This is what we're going to do. So now the board retains 1/3 of the existing boards that were there before. The board now requires that at least 1/3 of these members are female, at least 1/3 is female. So it gives you a guideline as to how it is that these persons are supposed to be nominated, selected, and appointed to the respective PB boards.
Does it also give a guideline to their qualification?
It does. Well, not so much in terms of the regulation, but we have other instruments which I would have alluded to, such as the competency profile. So each public body has a competency profile. What this means is that they have different needs, different requirements. And so these competencies were developed outside of that need. And so your expertise, what the database does, is match your expertise with the competency of that respective public body. And then you will be shortlisted to be selected by the appointing authority.
Fit for purpose.
Fit for purpose.
All right, so we have been talking about data from the Finance Ministry, and we've gotten quite a few of the acronyms. We're getting an understanding of what has brought us here. But that data from the Finance Ministry has shown that public bodies are responsible for over $1 trillion of assets. That's more than $586 billion in revenue and $568 billion of expenditures. So it's very important to have competent personnel on these boards. The conversation isn't over. So we're going to go to a very brief break, and then we return to this conversation with Nofia Morgan. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Get the Facts. Our focus continues on improvements being made to the probity, transparency, and efficiency of the process of nominating, selecting, and appointing persons to serve on boards of public bodies. My guest is Director of the Public Body Board Secretariat at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Nofia Morgan. Lady Morgan, let's jump right back into it.
Sure.
Integrity has been a big concern in general, and integrity, that word has been used very often in speaking about this product in particular.
Right.
Talk to me about integrity.
In terms of, if you're going to look at the database and how it operates, in terms of its integrity, the database offers a pool, a directory of persons. What it does, it allows everyone to apply. It also, everyone has to go through the same selection process.
Right.
So I understand where it is that you're positioning in terms of the integrity, but the openness of the database and what it offers. So you, and it assists the minister as well, if in terms of its selection.
Right.
So where it is that the minister would have to make recommendations, and sometimes a ministry, such as Ministry of Health, and you have other ministries that have several public bodies, up to 10, 12. So the minister having to appoint 10 persons to each board, it's a little bit overwhelming. So what the database will do is offer a greater pool of persons with the matching competencies that will help its process to be easier.
So a quarter of the work is done already.
It is, in fact.
At the beginning of our interview, you had mentioned to me that the public doesn't have access to this, but we have been talking about this in the public sphere a lot, and integrity has been spoken of there. So the fact that this is structured, it's not about any one person's perspective, does help with public trust, does it not?
It does help with public trust, but in terms of the access that I was referring to is the data.
Right.
Because we're guided by the data protection, and we have to protect the information that we're given that is entered online. So in terms of that kind of protection and that access, because once you submit your application, it is stored on our database.
Right.
And we have to keep it confidential in terms of your application and the information that is on it.
Right.
In terms of information to the public, because of the collaboration that has gone through in terms of the professional bodies, disability community, the academia, everybody has been engaging in this conversation leading up to this point.
Yes.
The formulation of the CGA, right back down to the nominations.
CGA.
Corporate Governance Framework,
Okay.
Right back down to the regulation. We call it Regs 2021 for short.
Okay.
It's quite a mouthful. The process has been open, and both parties, both sides, have been involved in the discussions. Everybody, PSOJ, as I mentioned before, has been involved. So it is not something that the ministry has done and is now putting out. It has discussions have been had, and we have spoken to the public bodies and so on in this respect.
All right. So the data isn't open, but the process leading up to the creation of this thing, it has been out there in this sphere. People can trust it.
People can trust the process.
All right. And trust the appointments.
And trust the appointments, because as I said before, what will happen is that once you submit your application and the need arises for us to fit a board, we would start the process, because it's a process leading up to that. Persons are selected based on their competencies and their qualifications based on what you would have entered on your application. So you're competent in law, you're competent in agriculture. And
which is vetted.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we have a due diligence process where we check the veracity of the information that you would have submitted and before accepting the application. When the time comes for the appointments to be made, the selection rather to be made, we select it, a system-based selection. So I don't go in and say, I know John or I know Peter.
Right.
It is a system-based selection, and what it does is select you based on the match that your qualification and competency would have generated in the system, and that is sent to the appointing authority for their decisions before an appointment is made.
Oh, thank you. That does help with establishing trust.
Yes,
it really does. Now, I know that there are some people who are watching who wanted us to hurry up and get to this point, so let's do it.
All right.
How do persons apply?
All right. Funny that you asked that. We launched a database and we're excited about populating.
Right.
And so in populating the database, the application is easily accessible on the ministry's website. Just go to the Ministry of Finance's website, click on the link on our governance portal, and just complete the application. It is a simple application process requiring that you give attestation to a due diligence, because that is a part of the process, and the regulation requires that.
Right.
So all of that consideration was made when we were developing the database.
Can I chip in here just a bit? As you mentioned, the application is simple. I'd also like you to talk about what sort of information would be required of me, say I'm applying.
So your demographics, naturally. So because when we are building out the database, a lot of the information required was considered based on the regulation and its requirements. So your demographics, your name and your date of birth. If you remember, we said 1/3 must be male, 1/3 must be female.
Right.
So those considerations were made. In terms of your qualifications, we need to know that you're so qualified, and you provide the institution that you would have been, you would have attended. Additionally, your competency.
Right.
Because remember, when we built out the database, it was built with the competencies for the public bodies. And so now your competency and your expertise must match with those public bodies in order to be selected for the process. Once that is done, you submit two references, name and contact details for your references. And then you submit a government-issued ID, and that's the end of the process.
And that's the end of the process for me.
Application.
And it begins your process.
So, yes. So on the back end, the Secretariat is in charge of doing the due diligence process. And so we go through the application just to make sure that the information is correct and everything is fine. Once that is done, you are a prospective director, because that's what the regulation refers to you as, prospect waiting to be appointed.
Right.
After that process, there's some boards, though, that might require a fit and proper. And we do ask for this at the attestation stage of your application. So there's an attestation form initially that you must attest whether or not you would like to serve, say, on a BGLC, which is betting, gaming, and lotteries, or any board of strategic importance.
Yes.
And National Water Commission is one such board, Petrojam. And so once you have indicated that, we enter that information as well. Say a board is expiring in 3 months. because as I said, it's a process. So what we try to do is to make sure that we follow through with all of the steps. We speak to the public body. We ensure that the shortlisting is done. If it's a case where a fit and proper is required, we liaise with FID to do the respective check.
FID.
Okay. So it's financial investigative division.
Thank you.
There you go. And what they will do is a little bit more detailed test for the persons who are going to sit on a financial board. So a financial board is expiring. It's a little bit more intricate than just the due diligence process that would have initially been done for all the applicants.
Right.
Once that is done, we shortlist the individuals and send it to the appointing authority, who is the minister. So they will consult and decide on a shorter list for submission for appointment.
Got you. And one thing that has come out as we are almost near our end, one thing that has come out, and maybe we should say it explicitly, there are two vetting processes, it sounds like. Initial vetting,
right,
and then you are a prospective director, as you mentioned.
There you go.
And then if it comes up that you would like to be, or you have been selected potentially to be appointed to a board, there's a secondary vetting.
So the secondary vetting only comes if you are going to be appointed to a financial board.
You said
or
that.
Strategic importance, yes.
You said that.
But generally, we do a due diligence check just to check the information for everybody, all the applicants. But if you would have selected on your application, because you're required to tick initially that you would like to serve on that particular board, then
puts you in that place.
It puts you in that place.
All right. We have gotten so much of the facts. And thank you so much for giving us all of this information about this database. I do think we can underline integrity again.
Absolutely. And that is where we want to go in terms of corporate governance and ensuring that everybody understands that this is how the process operates and this is how you can, and anybody can apply, and the same process applies to everyone.
Well, Lady Morgan, everybody's watching. There are many anybodies that are watching, and I'd like to give you the last few seconds of this interview to just speak directly to them on this matter.
Well, I would say I'm encouraging Jamaicans, professionals, to apply. It is a simple process. Go on, complete the application form, and become a part of the database, because this is a change that all of us would want to see, and this is a starting point. We're in the process of doing sensitization sessions, and if it is that you would like for us to come in and give you more details on what is happening in terms of the database and the Secretariat, you can contact us at the Ministry of Finance and Public Service. Miss Nofia Morgan is my name, and it is a pleasure. I thank you for having me, and I hope that we will be in contact in terms of getting the information out there.
All right, so this has been Get the Facts. Our guest was Director of the Public Body Board Secretariat at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, Nofia Morgan. Thank you for watching, and until next time, I'm Theodore Henry. Take good care.